Hello, this is part one in a three-part screencast on the implementation plan for LDT 570. And this particular screencast, part one, is going to focus on my role as a philosopher in implementing technology in my classroom. There were three articles I read with respect to this part of the screencast, and it got me thinking in particular about education and my role as an educator. I thought about my effectiveness. I began to examine how well do I learn? Am I a master learner, as it had outlined in one of the articles? Do I need to do better? Do I need to improve? Am I not quite a master learner yet? Do I need to get there? There was another article that talked about how to sell the love of learning. And I began to ask myself, well, how well do I sell love of learning? Can I do better? And I began to think about the innovator's mindset. I had gone back and read the article. I had read it before, but I read it again for purposes of this screencast. And I came to the conclusion that, yes, it is true, I do have an innovator's mindset, but perhaps I do not exhibit all 8 traits of that mindset. That was really my first thought. I thought about the whole idea of modeling and teaching learning. And it is true. We can't teach kids to learn unless we are learners ourselves. It really goes back to that whole leadership adage that you cannot lead people where you yourself are not willing to go. The same thing is true when you're modeling and teaching learning. We can't teach kids to learn unless we as teachers are learners ourselves. And as we are modeling and teaching learning, as we are doing this, modeling needs to encompass, as the article said, rich, passion-based interactions that take place in social learning spaces online. And yes, I am a huge fan of social learning spaces online, but overall, whether we're using technology or whether it's something traditional we are doing in the classroom, rich, passion-based interactions are going to go a long way as far as modeling and teaching learning. If our students see that we are passionate about what we are doing, passionate about teaching, passionate about the content area, and the experiences we are giving them are rich, it will go a long way. And I can tell you that in my own career, whenever I've had passion about something I'm teaching, I can tell you that with at least some of my students, that passion has been infectious, and it has increased my effectiveness. Modeling and teaching learning, it is not terribly difficult, depending on how it is done. I don't find there is anything really mystical or magical about it. It's just having a passion for what you're doing. And I think if you're passionate about what you are teaching, that will go a long way. And that's why I've always believed that it's not right to assign somebody to teach something they're not passionate about. Now, the biggest obstacle to modeling and teaching learning, and in particular effective modeling and teaching learning, the expectations and the outcomes as well as culture are going to play a big role in this. For example, the expectations and the outcomes that are expected of the faculty will determine this. If it's all about test scores and classroom management, well, I don't know how effective we can model and teach learning. If the culture of the school is such that, for example, morale is low, there will not be it won't be effective modeling and teaching of learning is not going to be terribly effective if the faculty is just, spending all their energy, if you will, to come to the school site every day, and they're just trying to keep their heads above water. So it's not going to go very far. And again, it is true, there is a selling aspect to modeling and teaching learning for our students. And I do believe that the selling approach makes a huge difference. And overall, I guess, and I'm not a salesman, but I'm thinking that the best way to sell something is to tie it to someone's life or make them aware of their need for something. I think that's in sales overall, and that could definitely include learning. In other words, we need to make the content relevant to someone's personal life. We have to make them aware that they need the skills we are teaching them. If we can tie the skills and the content and make it relevant and tie it to the students' personal lives, I believe we will be effective sellers. And I also believe the concept of empathy will go a long way in selling. If we can meet the students' needs, if we can design tasks and lessons and projects with the students in mind, will the students learn from this? That kind of thing. I believe that will go a long way in selling, modeling, and teaching learning. And I really began to think, how well do I do it? And I had addressed that at the beginning of this screencast, but I have found, personally, my effectiveness is such that I have found that my passion for my content area usually gets students motivated to learn. I found that when I use personal anecdotes, that usually goes a long way. For example, talking about busing and civil rights, and in talking about busing students to achieve racial inequalities in the schools, that was something we had studied in history. I had brought in the personal anecdote of my grandfather, who was a big city school principal, and his experiences with respect to busing students to achieve racial inequality. And I think this really spoke to the students. And my passion sells learning. It is true. Once again, I say, any personal stories you have, the passion you have, that goes a long way. For example, toward the end of my class, when we were studying periods in history that I was alive for, it was clear I was passionate about it, but I was also bringing in personal stories, things I remembered about that period of time. And, I do not consider myself a master learner per se, but I am certainly a learner, and others have seen that trait in me, and they have certainly commended me for it. And as I began to think about the innovator's mindset, I'd say that I do all 8 of them well. I came to that conclusion. I will concede that there are some that I do better than others, and I do have an aversion to risk. The risk-taking one is probably the aspect to the innovator's mindset I don't do well. And it's because I've had experience with unsupportive administrators. These are the types of administrators that will use your mistakes against you instead of encouraging innovation. They'll just count it as a black mark if you fail because they're trying to find every way possible to possibly fire you or send you packing. And of course, this goes back to the fact that I've traditionally worked in schools that are non-union without any job protections. And again, I emphasize the importance of modeling, and I say again, we cannot expect students, or anyone else we lead for that matter, to go where we are not willing to go ourselves. Skills in the 21st century are different than in the 20th, when most of us went to school. And if we don't know these skills, it's imperative that we learn them. And I do believe that a master learner will learn the most important skills first. If we don't know them, we learn them because it's imperative. One cannot teach their students what one does not know. And part of that is staying networked with other teachers, which I believe will go a long way to foster this. Using Feedly and Google Groups and other social medias, online networking to figure out what other teachers are doing. How are they modeling? How are they staying as learners and continually updating their craft? I thought about the whole concept of bringing the innovator's mindset to the classroom. And really, I don't think there's anything stopping the innovator's mindset in the classroom except a lack of will and resources. There needs to be a change of culture, a willingness by leadership to innovate as opposed to being focused on test scores. It needs to start at the top. This is my opinion. Yes, it can start at the grassroots level, but ultimately I believe you need buy-in, and this is from my own personal experience. Innovation needs to be a priority, and I do believe our decision makers need to make this a priority. And that doesn't just mean using words. They need to do it both in word and in deed. And how they can do it as far as their deeds is they need to make allocating resources a priority, investing in technology, emphasizing technology, updating technology, making computers more readily available and plentiful to all students in a school. Supportive administration, encouraging teachers to take risks without fear of being penalized for failure. I think that this will go a long way in bringing the innovator's mindset to a classroom. And with that, that concludes part 1 of this screencast. Thank you so much for watching.